I used to believe silence meant someone had nothing to say. Then I met Vincent Moretti's son, and I realized the quietest person in the room might be carrying the message everyone else was too busy to notice. The first time I saw that little boy, I wasn't supposed to be part of his story. I was just Emma, a waitress working another long evening shift in one of Manhattan's most private restaurants, the kind of place where people walked in wearing suits worth more than my monthly rent and spoke quietly because they knew power never needed to announce itself. I had spent years learning how to read people without interrupting them. A nervous smile before a difficult conversation. A hand covering an empty wedding ring mark. A customer staring at their phone waiting for a message that never arrived. Working in restaurants teaches you something important. Everyone communicates. Not everyone uses words. That night, the entire staff knew Vincent Moretti was coming before his car even stopped outside. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversations lowered. Managers checked every detail twice. Everyone suddenly cared about things they ignored 5 minutes earlier. I had heard his name before. Everyone in New York had. Vincent was the kind of man people described carefully. Powerful. Private. Untouchable. When he stepped inside, I understood why. He wore an elegant black suit that looked designed specifically for him. His black hair was slicked back perfectly, and dark ink tattoos covered his hands and reached above his collar, impossible to ignore. But it wasn't the tattoos or the expensive suit that made people move differently around him. It was his presence. Vincent looked like someone who spent his entire life making decisions nobody questioned. Then I noticed the small boy beside him. And strangely, he was the one who caught my attention. His son looked nothing like the world surrounding him. While adults adjusted themselves around Vincent's authority, the boy quietly observed everything. He sat at the table with his hands folded, looking at lights, reflections, movements. He never spoke. Not when the manager greeted him. Not when another server asked what he wanted. Not when Vincent gently placed the menu closer to him. "Don't take it personally," another waitress whispered to me. "He doesn't talk." I looked back at the child. "Never?" She shook her head. "Vincent has hired everyone. Specialists, private teachers, the best people money can find. Nobody understands him." The way she said it bothered me. Not because she was unkind. Because she sounded like everyone had already stopped trying. When I walked to their table, Vincent barely looked up at first. "Good evening. My name is Emma. I'll be helping you tonight." Vincent nodded politely, controlled and distant. "Thank you." His son didn't answer. But his fingers moved. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap. I noticed because it wasn't random. A few minutes later, another server passed carrying a tray of glasses filled with ice. The sound echoed softly. The boy's fingers repeated the same movement. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap. Everyone else saw a habit. I saw a reaction. I lowered myself slightly, keeping my voice calm. "Would you prefer your drink without ice?" The boy suddenly looked directly at me. The whole table went still. Vincent slowly raised his eyes. "What did you just ask him?" I looked at Vincent, then back at his son. "The ice bothers him." Vincent studied me like he was trying to solve a problem he had never encountered before. "How could you possibly know that?" I answered honestly. "Because he told me." His expression sharpened. "My son hasn't spoken a word to anyone in a very long time." I looked at the quiet boy watching us carefully. I didn't say he spoke. Then I noticed the small paper beside his hand. Lines. Shapes. Drawings everyone probably dismissed. But something about them felt intentional. The same symbols repeated again and again. A window. A clock. A small circle beside a doorway. I felt my chest tighten because suddenly I understood one thing clearly. This child had not been silent. The world had simply been listening in the wrong language. Vincent did not look away from me after I said those words. For a man surrounded by influence, wealth, and people waiting for his approval, he seemed completely unprepared for someone to tell him there was something he had missed. I expected him to disagree. Powerful people usually did not enjoy hearing that the solution they had searched years for might have been sitting quietly in front of them all along. Instead, Vincent turned toward his son. For the first time that night, he stopped looking for what was missing and started looking at what was there. "Show me," he said quietly. I looked at the paper again, then at the little boy. "Only if he wants me to." That answer surprised Vincent more than anything else I had said. "Everyone always asks my permission first," he replied. I gave a small smile. "But it is his message." The boy's eyes lifted. It was only for a moment, but I saw it. Recognition. Someone had finally understood that his silence did not mean he was not part of the conversation. I pointed gently at the drawings without touching the paper. "Can I?" The boy waited. Then slowly, he pushed the paper closer to me. Vincent watched that tiny movement like he had just witnessed something impossible. I studied the drawings carefully. The repeated symbols were too consistent to ignore. The clock always showed the same position. The doorway always had the same shape. The small circle was always placed in the same corner. "How long has he been drawing these?" I asked. Vincent's face changed slightly. "Months." "And nobody noticed the pattern?" His jaw tightened, but not from anger. From the pain of realizing the answer. They focused on why he stopped talking. I nodded. Maybe they should have focused on what he started doing instead. The silence after that felt heavier than any conversation. Vincent looked down at his tattooed hands resting on the table. Hands that probably signed contracts, controlled companies, and influenced decisions across the city. But none of that helped him understand the small hand drawing messages beside him. "What do you think it means?" he finally asked. I looked at the boy. "I think he should be the one to tell us." Vincent's son reached for a pencil. Slowly, carefully, he added something new to the paper. A small figure standing outside the doorway. Then he pushed it toward me. "Is this someone waiting?" I asked softly. The boy shook his head. I tried again. "Someone leaving?" His fingers stopped. Then he touched the paper once. "Yes." Vincent inhaled quietly. A small sound most people would have missed. But I heard it. Behind all the control was a father afraid of discovering his child had carried something painful alone. "Emma," Vincent said, and it was the first time he used my name. "How did you learn to see things this way?" I looked at the child instead of answering immediately. Because people are easy to misunderstand when we decide what their silence means before giving them a chance to explain it. Vincent did not respond. Maybe because part of him knew I was not only talking about his son. A few minutes later, my shift ended, and I thought that would be the last time I saw them. I grabbed my coat, stepped outside into the cold Manhattan air, and reminded myself that people like Vincent Moretti belonged to a different world. Then a black car stopped near the sidewalk. The window lowered. Vincent was inside. "Emma," he said. "I have spent years hiring people who studied my son." He paused. Tonight, a waitress understood him better than anyone. I did not know what to say. Then Vincent looked back toward the quiet little boy sitting beside him. "I am not asking you because I am Vincent Moretti." His voice softened. "I am asking because I am his father." And that was the first moment I saw the difference between the man the world feared and the man his son needed. I almost said no. That was the reasonable answer. Vincent's world was not my world, and people like me usually did not step into places built for people like him. I had bills to pay, another shift the next morning, and a normal life that did not include private cars waiting outside expensive restaurants. But then I looked through the window and saw his son. The boy was not watching Vincent. He was watching me. Not with expectation. Not with excitement. With a quiet question he was too afraid to ask. Would I leave like everyone else who tried and failed? I walked closer to the car. I need to understand something first, I told Vincent. I am not a specialist. I am not promising I can fix anything. Vincent's expression stayed calm, but his eyes revealed more than he probably wanted. I am not asking you to fix my son. He looked back at the boy. I am asking you to understand him. That answer was the reason I agreed. The next afternoon, I arrived at Vincent's estate outside the busiest part of New York City. I expected luxury, and I found it. Tall gates. Perfect landscaping. A house so large every sound seemed carefully controlled. But what surprised me was how quiet everything felt. Not peaceful. Empty. Like everyone inside was afraid to disturb something. A member of Vincent's staff opened the door and guided me inside. Every hallway looked flawless. Expensive paintings. Polished floors. Perfect organization. But nothing looked like a child lived there. No toys left behind. No drawings on the walls. No small signs of chaos. When Vincent appeared, he immediately noticed where I was looking. "What is it?" he asked. I hesitated. "Your home looks like a museum." He looked confused. "Is that a bad thing? For adults?" "No." I looked around. For a child trying to express himself? Maybe. Most people probably never spoke to Vincent that directly. I could tell by the way everyone nearby suddenly became uncomfortable. But Vincent did not stop me. "Explain," he said. I followed him upstairs to his son's room. That was where I finally saw the difference. The rest of the house belonged to Vincent. This room belonged to his son. Drawings covered the desk. Small objects were arranged carefully. Books were organized in a way that looked random until I paid attention. "He created his own language here," I whispered. Vincent stood near the doorway. For once, the most powerful person in the room looked like an outsider. "I came in here every night," he said quietly. "I looked at all of this every night. I picked up one of the drawings. You looked at it as a father searching for what was wrong." I turned toward him. Maybe he needed someone to search for what he was trying to say. Those words landed harder than I expected. Vincent looked away. It was the first time I saw him avoid something. Not because he was weak. Because the truth was painful. His son walked into the room moments later. He did not run to Vincent. He did not run to me. He simply sat at the desk and added another drawing to the collection. This time, I watched every movement. The color he chose. The position of each object. The way he paused before drawing certain shapes. Then I noticed something. The symbols from the restaurant were not the only repeated pattern. They were everywhere. Hidden inside dozens of drawings. The same time. The same doorway. The same missing detail. "Vincent," I said slowly. He immediately heard the change in my voice. "What did you find?" I placed several drawings beside each other. My heart started beating faster because the message was becoming clearer. His son had not been drawing memories. He had been creating a map of something important. Something he wanted someone to understand. Vincent stepped closer, his controlled expression beginning to break. "All this time," he whispered. He was trying to tell me something. The little boy looked up at his father. And without saying a word, his eyes answered. Yes. That single look from Vincent's son changed the entire room. No words. No explanation. No sound. But somehow, it felt louder than anything anyone could have said. Vincent stood frozen beside the desk, staring at the drawings spread in front of him. I could see the questions moving behind his eyes. How long had this been happening? How many times had his son tried to reach him? How many messages had been sitting right there while everyone searched somewhere else? Do you know what it means? Vincent asked me. The way he said it was different. At the restaurant, his voice carried authority. Now, standing inside his son's room, he sounded like any other father hoping for an answer. I looked carefully at every drawing again. Not completely. Vincent looked disappointed for a second, but I continued. And that is a good thing. His eyebrows narrowed slightly. Why? I looked toward his son. Because if I guess, I am doing the same thing everyone else did. I am deciding his story without letting him show us. The boy watched me closely. I picked up 3 drawings and placed them gently on the floor. Can we try something? He hesitated, then gave a small nod. Vincent noticed it immediately. I think every parent understands their child in some way, even when they feel lost. Vincent knew every tiny expression. Every movement. Every change. He was not a father who did not care. He was a father who had been searching in the wrong direction. I pointed to the drawing of the clock. This appears the most. The boy looked down. Is the time important? Nothing. No reaction. I changed the question. Did something happen at this time? His fingers moved slightly. 1 tap. Yes. Vincent stepped closer. What happened? The boy immediately stopped. His shoulders tightened. Vincent saw it and stepped back before I even said anything. That was the first moment I realized he was learning. The old Vincent would have searched for an answer immediately. This Vincent was trying to understand the silence between answers. Sorry, he whispered to his son. A man who could command an entire room apologized so quietly only 3 people heard it. And somehow, that mattered more. I moved to the second drawing. The doorway. Is this somewhere inside the house? The boy shook his head. Somewhere outside? 1 tap. Yes. Slowly, piece by piece, the message started opening. It was not a perfect conversation. It was not fast. It took patience. It took waiting through moments where nothing happened. But eventually, the drawings led us somewhere unexpected. A small community center about 20 minutes away. A place Vincent recognized immediately. I used to take him there, he said. His voice became distant. Before everything changed. I did not ask what he meant. Not yet. Some memories need a door opened slowly. His son reached for another paper and drew 2 figures this time. 1 small. 1 tall. Standing together. Then he pushed it toward Vincent. For the first time, the message was not for me to understand. It was for his father. Vincent picked up the paper carefully. I saw his tattooed fingers hold that simple drawing like it was worth more than anything he owned. That is us, he whispered. His son looked at him. 1 tap. Yes. The room became completely still. Then I finally understood the hidden piece everyone had missed. The message was not only about a place. It was about a moment. A memory his son had been trying to return to. Not because he was trapped in the past. Because somewhere along the way, the life around him had changed, and he did not know how to ask for what he lost. Vincent built a world where his son had everything. But the drawings were showing something painfully simple. The one thing the child missed most was not something money could bring back. It was time with his father. The next morning, I thought the hardest part was already behind us. I thought understanding the message would bring Vincent and his son closer immediately. I thought finding the missing piece meant everything would finally start healing. I was wrong. Sometimes discovering the truth is not the end of the problem. Sometimes it is the moment people have to face what they spent years avoiding. Vincent arranged for us to visit the community center from the drawings. He handled everything the way Vincent handled most things. Quickly. Efficiently. Completely. A private car waited outside. His schedule was cleared. His staff prepared every detail. From the outside, it looked perfect. But when his son walked downstairs and saw the plan already made for him, he stopped. I noticed it before anyone else did. The small hesitation. The way his fingers curled around his notebook. The way his eyes moved from the car to Vincent. "Wait," I said softly. Vincent turned toward me. "What is wrong?" I looked at his son. Did anyone ask him if he wanted to go today? The question changed the entire mood. Vincent looked confused. He has been drawing this place for months. I know. I kept my voice calm. But showing us something and being ready to return, there are two different things. Vincent's expression became colder, not because he was angry, but because he was afraid. I was beginning to understand that about him. Fear looked different on powerful people. Sometimes it looked like control. "Emma, he has been waiting for someone to understand this. We finally do." "We understand part of it," I answered. "Not all of it." He looked away for a moment. I lost years not knowing what my own son needed. His voice was quiet. "I am not losing more time." And there it was. The real conflict. Vincent was not rushing because he did not care. He was rushing because he cared too much. But love mixed with guilt can still make the wrong choice. His son stepped back from the door. Only a few inches. But enough. Vincent saw it. The pain in his eyes appeared instantly. "I am trying to help him," he said. I nodded. "I know. Then why does it feel like you are telling me I am failing?" That question stayed in the air between us. Because the truth was, Vincent had spent years hearing experts tell him what was missing. I was the first person asking him to change what he was giving. "I am not saying you failed," I said. "I am saying you cannot protect someone by controlling every step they take." The room became silent. The words affected him more than I expected. For the first time since I met him, Vincent looked at me like we were standing on opposite sides. "You think that is what I do?" he asked. I did not answer quickly because he deserved honesty, not judgment. "I think you built a world where nothing can reach him." I looked around the beautiful house. But maybe nothing can reach him because everything is kept too far away. Vincent stepped back. Not physically. Emotionally. I felt it immediately. The wall returning. The same wall everyone else saw. "Thank you for your help, Emma," he said politely. Too politely. "I think we should stop for today." His son looked between us, understanding more than anyone realized. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door, but leaving felt heavier than I expected. Before I stepped outside, I turned back one last time. "Vincent, your son never needed someone to give him the whole world." He looked at me but said nothing. He was asking if you could sit inside his for a while. I left without knowing if those words helped him or pushed him further away. I returned to my normal life after leaving Vincent's estate, but something about that house stayed with me. Not the size of it. Not the expensive details or the quiet hallways. It was the look on his son's face when I walked away. I had seen that expression before in people who were surrounded by everything except what they truly needed. At the restaurant that evening, I tried to convince myself that my part in their story was finished. Vincent had spent years solving problems his own way. Maybe it was not my place to challenge that. Maybe a waitress from Manhattan had already stepped too far into a world she did not belong to. But halfway through my shift, I found something in my apron pocket. A folded piece of paper. At first, I thought it was an old receipt. Then I opened it. My breath stopped. It was a drawing. Simple. Quiet. Familiar. There were 3 figures this time. A small one. A tall one. And another standing slightly apart. Me. I did not know when Vincent's son had placed it there, but I understood why. He was not asking me to come back and solve everything. He was showing me that I had become part of the conversation. That was something I could not ignore. The next morning, I went back to Vincent's estate. Nobody expected me. When the door opened, Vincent stood on the other side. He looked exactly the same as always. Black suit. Perfect control. The kind of man who looked impossible to shake. Except his eyes were different. Tired. "Emma," he said quietly. "I thought you were done." I held up the drawing. I think someone disagreed. Vincent looked at the paper, and the guarded expression disappeared for a moment. "He gave you that?" I nodded. "Yes." He looked away. "I spent last night looking through every drawing again." His voice lowered. "Not searching for answers this time. Just looking." That difference mattered. Inside the house, something had changed. Small things. Almost invisible things. A few drawings were no longer hidden away in his son's room. They were placed in the hallway. A few toys sat near the living room. The house was still elegant, but it finally looked like a child was allowed to exist inside it. "You moved them," I said. Vincent looked at the drawings. "I spent years protecting his space." He paused. I never realized I was separating his world from mine. It would have been easy to pretend everything was fixed after that. But real change does not happen in one emotional moment. Vincent was still learning. So was I. Later that afternoon, we finally returned to the community center. This time, nobody rushed. No perfect plan. No controlled schedule. Vincent simply walked beside his son and waited. When we reached the entrance, the boy stopped at the doorway from his drawings. The exact doorway. Vincent looked like he wanted to ask 100 questions, but he stayed quiet. Then his son reached into his notebook and pulled out one final drawing. This one was different. It showed the same doorway, but now there was a small bench beside it. Vincent stared at the picture. Then at the real bench nearby. Slowly, he walked toward it. "This bench?" he asked. One tap. "Yes." Vincent sat down. His son sat beside him. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden miracle. No perfect ending. Just a father and son sitting together in a place they had forgotten how to share. And somehow, that quiet moment said more than words ever could. The bench outside the community center became the place where I finally understood the part of the message none of us had seen before. We thought Vincent's son had been trying to bring back one memory. One afternoon. One moment with his father. But children often understand feelings before adults find words for them. He was not only showing Vincent where something changed. He was showing him when. Vincent sat beside his son for almost an hour that day. No phone calls. No interruptions. No one waiting for him to make decisions. For the first time since I met him, Vincent Moretti was not acting like the man responsible for controlling everything around him. He was simply a father sitting beside his child. But when we returned to the estate, the final part of the message appeared. His son walked straight to his room, opened a small drawer, and removed a collection of older drawings we had never seen before. Vincent looked confused. "You kept more?" The boy nodded. One tap. "Yes." He placed them on the table one by one. I immediately noticed something different. These drawings were not about the community center. They were about home. The large windows. The long hallways. The dinner table. But in every picture, the same thing was missing. Vincent. I did not want to say it out loud. Not because Vincent could not handle the truth, but because I knew how deeply it would hurt. He noticed my silence. Emma. I looked up. Tell me. That was one thing about Vincent I respected. Even when the truth was difficult, he never ran from it. I touched one of the drawings gently. I think he was trying to show the difference between being protected and being together. Vincent stared at the pictures. The room became painfully quiet. I was always here, he whispered. His son looked down. And that small reaction answered before I could. Vincent understood. Being inside the same house was not the same as being present. The realization hit him harder than anything else. He stepped away from the table and walked toward the window. The old Vincent would have hidden behind control. This time, he did not. I thought if I created a perfect life for him, he would never feel the things I felt growing up. His voice was low. I thought removing every problem was my job. I walked closer, but I did not interrupt. He needed to reach the answer himself. After a moment, he turned around. But I removed too much. His son watched him carefully. Vincent slowly walked back and sat across from him. Not above him. Not standing like the person with all the answers. Sitting at the same level. I need to tell you something, Vincent said softly. I spent a long time thinking my job was to make sure nothing could ever hurt you or disappoint you. He looked at the drawings. But I forgot that sometimes you did not need me to build walls. A pause. You needed me to open doors. His son's eyes changed. Then, slowly, he reached forward and placed his small hand over Vincent's tattooed one. No words. No grand moment. Just forgiveness in the only language he needed. I looked away for a second because that moment belonged to them. Later, as I prepared to leave, Vincent walked me to the door. You saw something everyone else missed, he said. I shook my head. No. Your son showed everyone. I was just the first person who stopped long enough to notice. Vincent looked back toward the room where his son was drawing again. But this time, the drawing was different. 3 figures. Sitting together. No distance between them. And I realized the greatest messages are not always hidden because someone cannot speak. Sometimes they are hidden because the world forgets how to listen. For the next few weeks, I watched Vincent learn something that no amount of success had ever taught him. He learned how to slow down. To wait. To listen without searching for an immediate solution. It sounded simple, but for a man who had built his entire life around solving problems before they could grow, patience was the hardest skill of all. The changes inside the estate were small at first. A sketch left on the kitchen counter stayed there instead of being carefully placed away. A stack of books appeared beside the couch because that was where his son liked reading. Dinner was no longer arranged around Vincent's schedule. Vincent arranged his schedule around being there. The house did not lose its elegance. It gained a heartbeat. One evening after my shift at the restaurant, I visited them again. This time, the front door opened before anyone greeted me. Vincent's son was standing there with his notebook in his hands. I smiled. I guess you were expecting me. He looked down and drew something quickly. A clock. But this time, the hands showed a new time. I remembered the old drawings immediately. The repeated hour from before. The moment he was trying to recover. Now he had chosen a different one. A new memory. Not a lost one. When Vincent walked in, I saw him notice the same thing. He did not ask me what it meant. He did not ask anyone else to explain his own child. Instead, he sat down beside him. Is this for today? He asked. One tap. Yes. That tiny answer made Vincent smile in a way I had never seen before. Not the controlled expression he gave the outside world. Something real. Something only his son could bring out. But the biggest change came later that night. Vincent received an important call while we were looking through new drawings together. Months earlier, he would have answered instantly. Everyone expected Vincent Moretti to always be available. But this time, he looked at the phone, silenced it, and placed it face down. His son noticed. So did I. The old me would have answered, Vincent admitted. I smiled slightly. What changed? He looked at the notebook on the table. I spent years believing responsibility meant carrying everything. He paused. I never realized sometimes responsibility means knowing what deserves your attention first. That was when I understood something about Vincent. People saw the suit, the tattoos, the reputation, the power. They created an idea of him before they ever knew him. Maybe in a different way, they had done to him what they had done to his son. They assumed silence meant there was nothing underneath. Later, while helping clean the table, I found another drawing. This one stopped me. It showed Vincent standing in front of a large shadow. Behind him was his son. Beside him was me. But the interesting part was not the people. It was Vincent's hands. His son had drawn them carefully. The same hands most people noticed first because of the dark ink covering them. Except in the drawing, those hands were not symbols of fear. They were holding a small piece of paper. A message. I showed Vincent. He stared at it for a long time. All my life, he said quietly, people looked at my hands and decided what kind of man I was. His son reached over and touched the drawing. Then he pointed at Vincent. The meaning was clear. He never saw what everyone else saw. He saw his father. That was the night I realized the child was not the only person who had been misunderstood. Vincent had spent years protecting everyone else from the world. But somehow, the quietest person in his life had been protecting the best part of him all along. Months passed before I understood the true impact of what happened inside that quiet house. Life did not transform into something perfect overnight. Vincent was still Vincent. He still carried responsibility on his shoulders. He still entered rooms with the same controlled presence that made people pay attention before he said a word. But something important had changed. He no longer believed strength meant never showing uncertainty. He no longer believed love was measured only by what he could provide. And his son no longer lived surrounded by people trying to pull words out of him before understanding the language he already had. One afternoon, I arrived at the estate after finishing my shift at the restaurant. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not noise. Not chaos. Life. Someone moving through the kitchen. Music playing softly from another room. The quiet scratch of a pencil moving across paper. It was still the same house I had entered months earlier, but it no longer felt like a place designed to protect someone from the world. It felt like a place where someone was finally allowed to experience it. Vincent was sitting at the table beside his son when I walked in. No expensive meeting. No phone in his hand. No distractions pulling him somewhere else. Just a father watching his child create something new. "You are early," Vincent said. I smiled. "You noticed." He looked at his son, then back at me. "I notice more things now." That simple sentence meant more coming from him than any grand promise could have. His son pushed a new drawing toward me. I expected another message. Another hidden meaning waiting to be discovered. But this one was different. It was not asking for anything. It was not trying to explain something painful. It was just a picture of three people sitting together outside the community center. The bench was still there. The doorway was still there. But everything felt different. "I think I understand this one," I said softly. The boy looked at me, waiting. It means you are happy. He stared at the drawing for a moment. Then he picked up his pencil. For a second, I thought he was going to correct me. Instead, he added one more thing. A small heart above the 3 figures. Vincent looked away briefly, and I knew why. Some emotions are easier to face when no one is watching. Later that evening, as I was leaving, Vincent walked with me outside. The city lights were glowing in the distance, and for once, he did not seem like a man carrying the weight of all of them. Do you ever think about how strange it is? He asked. What? That everyone searched for something complicated. He looked back toward the house. And the answer was something simple. I thought about that for a moment. Simple does not mean easy. Vincent nodded because he knew that better than anyone. It was easy to hire experts. It was easy to build walls. It was easy to protect someone from a distance. The difficult part was sitting beside someone in their silence and staying long enough to understand it. Before I left, his son came outside holding one final drawing. He handed it to me. It showed the first night at the restaurant. The table. The paper. The moment everything started. But he changed one detail. In the drawing, I was not standing across from him anymore. I was sitting beside him. I looked at Vincent, and he understood it at the same time I did. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not your advice, your solutions, or your power. Sometimes the greatest gift is your willingness to stay, listen, and finally see the person who was there all along.